This video made possible by Killer Visual Strategies. Let us tell your story. Visit killervisualstrategies.com to learn more.
Doug Baldwin. Thanks, man. Good there. I was gonna say he's a self-proclaimed geek, but the audience got in the way there.
You guys know that already, though.
Doug, thanks for being here. We've only got a little bit of time and a lot to get into. We will have time for a little bit of Q&A, so get your questions ready. But first, I want to get into your tweets. Recently, you've been tweeting about topics such as tax rates, Andrew Yang, healthcare, Democratic debates. And Steve Largent, another former epic Seahawks receiver, after his career, he went into politics, House of Representatives.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
I was going to ask, when are you going to go run for office?
No.
Nothing?
No. Not in the foreseeable future. Boo. I want to work outside of politics. I feel like I can be more effective working outside of the red tape.
Yeah. What's your nice. What's your just general take on, since you're not going to run for office, I think you could kind of give us your unfiltered take on where we are as a country right now. And you recently said our entire political system and democracy is under attack. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
Expand on that, and what do you mean by that?
We only got 30 minutes. I think the human element of our society is losing itself. It's this mindset of empathy, of really thinking about other human beings as individuals and human beings who are trying to live on this rock that we call Earth. That's our collective purpose, right? Is to survive, is to thrive. And I think for whatever reason, because we've become more siloed in our thinking and in our beliefs, we've become more separated, more segregated. And the diversity of not only ethnicity, but diversity of thought is not what it used to be, in my opinion. It's not as valued as it should be. And I think we're looking at that playing out in our political system right now. I don't want to get too political, but if you go look at my tweets, you know where I stand.
Yeah, I've always appreciated your thoughts and insights outside of football. But there is, the criticism of stick to sports, and I know you don't like this question, but I got to ask you, what's your take on that, especially with athlete activism now and social media? It's become a bigger deal, I would say. Yeah. What do you say to the people who tell you stick to sports, Doug?
This is a PG program, right? All right, I will. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Typically, when somebody says, "Oh, you're an athlete, stick to sports," I say, "Well, fuck you." And the reason why is because it's not an athlete thing. It's not an entertainer thing. It's a human thing. I'm a human. I inhabit this earth. There are inherently societal issues that I care about and I want to talk about and I want to work towards solving. And so when anybody says, stick to your day job or stick to what I just say, fuck you. I'm going to do exactly what I was raised to do, what my mom as a social activist in her own right was raised to do, and that was fight for the betterment of society, not just for the betterment of the bottom line of your company or your business, but for human beings who, again, inhabit this earth and are only trying to survive just like everybody else.
And speaking of issues you care about, let's talk about the Family First Community Center down in Renton, which I know also holds a special place in your heart. And some of the inspiration for this community center, I know, came from your childhood in Pensacola, Florida. Yep. Talk a bit about, maybe there's someone from Pensacola here.
Oh, really? I'm sorry to hear that.
But talk a bit about the inspiration for starting this community center. I think it kind of dates back to how you grew up and what you had as a youngster, and kind of led you to doing this big project.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that for children especially, it's so prevalent nowadays, but for children growing up, one of the most important aspects or the things that they can enjoy is to genuinely have a childhood, to be able to be a kid. And a lot of children nowadays are not growing up in situations where they can experience that. You know, their parents are in more dire situations or fighting survival in a number of different ways, where the children are forced to be in situations where they can't really have a childhood, or the childhood looks differently. And so this community center back home in Florida, in Pensacola, Florida, that was my childhood. You know, it created this safe space for me to be me, to be a child, to kind of find myself, and also to, in some degree, to lose myself, so that I could find myself. And so this community center that we're building in Renton, by the way, we are $5 million short of our gap. So if anybody wants to write a check, more than welcome to do that. But this community center is, I kind of hate calling it a community center, because community center kind of has this traditional thought around it. It's a multifaceted hub for the community. So obviously there's going to be a recreational component to it, but I brought in Health Point, and they're going to offer all of the medical, all of the dental. We're going to focus on mental health as well. We're going to put in some resources and services that are going to be tailored towards the homeless population. Really, again, trying to be as thoughtful and empathic as we can to the general population in this area, so that we can create a bigger return, if you will. Return in a sense that not for the bottom line, but for the health and wellness of the community.
And why do it in Seattle, and why Renton?
Well, Renton was the first place that I came to when I moved here in 2011. There was this teriyaki spot about a mile away from the house that I stayed at. It's called Mama's Teriyaki, best teriyaki in the world, hands down. I've been all over the world. I've tasted all the teriyaki. This place is hands down the best teriyaki. But no, when I first got there, she like took me in. You know, she didn't know who I was. I was an undrafted rookie. Nobody knew who I was, and so, you know, it wasn't. She didn't treat me special because I was a Seahawk. She just treated me special because I was a new face, and she felt like, you know, let me bring this kid in, see if, you know, what he needs. And she treated me with so much love. And when I started opening my eyes and looking around the community, that was what I was receiving. And a lot of the kids that were hanging out at that teriyaki spot, they didn't really have anywhere to go. They didn't have a community center. And so, working with the city of Renton, and specifically Mayor Dennis Law, and, you know, had a conversation of like, let's bring this to life, and we're going to break ground in February.
Yeah, it's a fantastic project. Yeah. So that's keeping you busy post Seahawks. You're also getting into, you've been in the tech industry, and even more so now, you've got a new, I was peeping your LinkedIn and I saw you got a new job.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yes, I am proud to say I'm a senior advisor of product concepts at Intellectual Ventures. One of my colleagues is in the back over there. Gene, what's up? Thanks for showing up. As a kid, I grew up playing with Legos. And not the Legos in the sense of like you go to the store, you buy the Legos, you dump them out, and then you read the manual of how to build whatever it was. No, I would buy the Legos, pour them in the box with all my other Legos, and then just create whatever I wanted to create. And Intellectual Ventures gives me that avenue to do that again. You know, I get to use my intellect. I get to flex these muscles that I haven't been able to flex in a long time, and use my creativity. And so I'm really excited about that. And obviously, putting myself in that is also being able to access technology that I can then push towards the greater good, you know, to benefit society.
So that's awesome, and you're also been on the investment side as well, and one of the companies that Doug's an investor in is Vices here in Seattle. They make a high-tech helmet. Mm-hmm. I caught up with Vices CEO Dave Marver this week, and here's what he said about you. As you might expect, Doug is very serious as an investor. He does a lot of diligence before getting involved, and our business reviews with Doug are more intense than with any other investor. He really challenges management, but it all comes from a supportive place. Is that accurate?
He was being nice.
What's that like? I mean, being an investor for this super high-profile company, yeah, doing football helmets, which obviously is close to you, and you know the product very well, and you wore the helmet actually when you were on the team. Mm-hmm. What's investing been like for you, and kind of what's your approach as you kind of sit in that seat?
Yeah, well, specifically with Vices, it wasn't necessarily just the helmet, the football helmet that I was attracted to. It was the technology that went into the helmet, right? And there's so many applications for that technology outside of football. You know, we're, I guess I can say this, you know, we're exploring different avenues to use this technology, whether it's in other sports arenas, the military. It's got a wealth of flexibility in it. But overall, in terms of investing, my approach is simply, how can we impact human lives, not necessarily to make life easier, because I think that that's kind of the route that technology has done nowadays, is we've gone down the route of making life easier for people, but not necessarily better for human beings. And so when I invest, my due diligence is based on, is this product, this innovation, this technology, is it going to make life better for human beings? Not necessarily easier, but better. As a father, as somebody who thinks, long-term down the line for not only my children, but for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, I want to make sure that I'm investing in companies that are taking that approach as well and are considering the future of our society.
Yeah, I think one of your other investing or working mantras you said before is you don't want to work with a-holes, right? Any insight into that in terms of, is that from just your football career? Where's that philosophy come from?
That's life. I mean, I guess I kind of, because I'm an asshole sometimes, so I guess that's not fair. But I guess the real crux of it all is I want to work with people who are honest. Don't bullshit me. Like, just be honest. And whether it's good or bad, be honest. We can't solve anything. We can't fix the problem if you're not honest about the problem. And so, yeah, that's aside from the technology or the big idea. When I work with people, I want to work with people who are honest, and who see me as a human being first and foremost, not as a football player, because I think that gets tiring. I'm not a zoo animal. I'm a human being. And so that's permeated itself into how I deal with business and with investments. I want to deal with people who are honest, who are real human beings, and who want to solve real human being problems.
Yeah, talk about the Doug Baldwin, the football player, Doug Baldwin, right? And I think, not to bring up your Twitter again, but your Twitter bio, it quotes Iron Man. If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
Why'd you put that there, and what does that kind of say about what you're thinking?
Yeah, so, as an entertainer, right, it's very easy to make that business, that arena, your identity, right? I was the Seahawks wide receiver, Doug Baldwin, for a long time. And don't get me wrong, it comes with its perks. But at the same time, there's an emotional, mental, and physical, but even more so, spiritual consequence that comes with kind of selling yourself to that industry. You're not really front-facing the honest side of yourself. You're only showing people what they want to see. You're only providing them with the content that will get them to like your picture or to comment positively about who you are. And as I went further down that road, it became more unbearable for me because, back to what I said earlier, it felt dishonest. And that's not everybody's case, right? That's not an indictment on everybody. That's just how I felt. I don't want you guys running and saying that I'm talking crap about other players, but that's how I feel, right? And that quote from Iron Man, it's like, if your value, if your affirmation of who you really are does not exist outside of that industry, outside of being a football player, outside of being a CEO, outside of being an actor, outside of being a teacher, a fireman, or whatever, if you don't have an identity outside of that, then once you lose that, who are you? And when you have to go down that road of asking yourself who you are after you lose that, and you don't have the answers, it will cause a lot of drama and stress and issues that I'm sure you're about to ask me about.
Yeah. You'd be a good interviewer. You have talked about this recently, just about that transition, and you just got into it there, just mentally and it's just like spiritually, kind of going from this one career, and like you said, it was your identity since you were 6 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And then moving through that, and I'm sure that was just extremely difficult, and I know you went through some depression, and
yeah.
As much as you can say, like what was that like, and what did you do to kind of get pushed through that and then get through that?
Yeah, so my first lesson that I learned the hard way is that I'm not out of the depression. right? I'm a checklist kind of guy, right? I want to get through something, check it off my list, I'm good. That's just not how depression works. And I'm not naive enough to think now, especially now, knowing that there have been times where I said, oh, I'm on the other side of it, and then I slip back into it. And really what it comes down to is, this idea of identity. Again, my affirmation, my value in the world was based on my performance on the football field. And it was instant gratification, right? If I dropped a pass, you all saw it, everybody, the fans, they would let me know. If I made a touchdown, everybody would let me know. And so it's this roller coaster ride of gaining that affirmation and that value in my life. And that's not any different than any other profession, right? It's just my profession is on a live stage. Millions of people are watching my job, what I do on a day-to-day basis, and commenting on my performance. And, technology has made that pervasive in a lot of ways. But really what it comes down to is, I had to get out of that mentality. I had to get out of that thought process that if I didn't score a touchdown, that my value in life was less, right? And so when football was gone, when I was just left with this shell, without really reflecting and working on who I really was prior to leaving, and I had a lot of questions I had to answer, and questions that I had to actually find the right questions to ask myself. And it sent me down a dark path, I'm not gonna lie. It was difficult for a lot of the time, but I find my value in things that are not, I hate to get spiritual on you all, but it's a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual battle. I have to find a foundation in something that's not of this world that will last well beyond when I'm gone, and again, it comes with a lot of self-reflection, just understanding who you really are and what you want to be, and ultimately that somebody gave their life for you. As much as I dislike some of the decisions my mom and my dad made as adults and as parents, I'm alive, and it took some level of care and time and effort to make sure that I got to this point, and not everybody can say that, and so I'm grateful for that. And so really what this process has taught me more so than anything is just be grateful, not only for the good, but also for the bad.
Yeah. In terms of just like overcoming challenges, and you kind of just walked us through, do you have advice for people here? I mean, this is not just a sports question, it's like overcoming battles in your life, or whether you're at work or you're by yourself or with a team. Advice you have that just, you almost quit football, I think, as a 6-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. And your mom got you back into it. Yeah. You had struggles at Stanford. Mm-hmm. Your second year here in Seattle was tough. Mm-hmm. You've kind of had these roadblocks, as easy as it maybe seems from the outside. You've had these things you've gotten over. Are you doing the same thing each time? What's the right mindset when someone's facing one of those roadblocks in their life or at work? And how should we kind of get past those?
Yeah, I'm not going to proclaim like I'm this all-knowing being of how to overcome obstacles and challenges, but what in my 31 years of life, what I've learned that's resonated with me is that I'm not seeking success anymore. I'm seeking failure. I know that sounds awkward and it sounds weird, but I truly believe that if you're not failing, you're not learning, right? Like the only way to truly learn is to fail. And if you're not learning, then you're not evolving, right? And if you're not evolving, then you're going to die. And I don't want to die, and not necessarily in the sense of my physical being, but my children. I want the fervor of evolving and of growing and of learning, of being a life learner. I want to instill that into them. And if I wasn't modeling that, if I didn't pursue that myself, how could I teach them? And so the idea of evolving, I want my children to do that. I want my children to know that. And so my advice to anybody who does, face challenges and obstacles, whether it's in business or in life, like look forward to those. Those are your challenges and opportunities that are going to excel you to the next level. It shouldn't be something that's a detriment to your mental health or your emotional health. You should look at that as a positive, as an appreciation that I'm out in the world and I'm doing life out in the world. And of course, when you're out in the world, you're going to face those challenges, and that's how you grow, that's how you evolve, and that's how you don't die.
We've got 7-8 minutes, so if you have questions, please line up. But in the meantime, I think on the spiritual level, I think your favorite book that you've said is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Thanks. Thank you. Why is that your favorite book?
It's such a paradox, right? It's not about, just read the book, first and foremost. It's a beautiful book, but the writer's articulating that it's not necessarily not caring about life, right? It's not that you don't care about things that are important. It's just about limiting the scope of the things that you care about and understanding truly what is the value of this thing that I'm caring about, and am I placing the right amount of value and effort towards that thing. It was instrumental for me in terms of kind of navigating what was important in my life, but it's a very layman's term approach of, understanding the spirituality of just living life and understanding that there's some things that we place so much value on that add stress to our lives that is irrelevant and really doesn't exist, but yet we put it there. And that wall that we place, that obstacle that we place that's not really there, that doesn't really exist, that can sometimes inhibit us from moving forward. It discourages us from evolving. And that book was an excellent articulation of how to get around that, and not get around it, but to understand it, to work with it, to get through it.
Got it. I got a question here.
Hey, Doug, thank you for your time. I was wondering if you could comment a little bit. Well, let me introduce this a little. So for the non-football fans here, earlier this year, Andrew Luck was kind of surprised with the public with his retirement. He's formerly the quarterback for the Colts, another Stanford alum, and
Former teammate at Doug's.
Former teammate, and perceived as someone who is pretty good at the game, but also kind of well-respected outside the game. Just what your thoughts or comments are about sort of the whole situation that arose from that, where there was a lot of blowback. People were questioning a very private decision in a very public way, and I think you've kind of answered that throughout your talk today in terms of how you perceive that. But just if you had any comments on that specific situation and things that the general public could have learned maybe about how quickly they are to react to kind of athletes' personal decisions.
Yeah. We're human beings. That's really what it comes down to, right? Andrew has been a good friend of mine since college, and obviously we talked through this process because I went through the process. But what it comes down to is we're human beings, and there's a law of diminishing returns. No matter how much money you make, at some point there is the law of diminishing returns where I got to really evaluate where's my life headed. And when you get to a point where you have to start contemplating whether you're going to be able to run around with your kids when you're older or hold your children when they're born, those are questions that you have to ask yourself, then there's something wrong, right? And so I think, and don't take this the wrong way, but I think the general public in a lot of ways doesn't understand that. They see us as these modern day gladiators, and I would even take it a step further and say I think we're modern day. Don't take this the wrong way, but I do think in some ways, if you look at the structure of this industry, it does look like modern day slavery. And yes, of course, we do make a lot of money, but in totality, money is not what makes you happy. It does not make you happy. There's a lot of people who have a lot of money who are unhappy and unhealthy. But they lock you into this mentality that you are supposed to give everything for the greater good of the team. But yet when the team no longer can use you, then you are nothing to them. They force you to buy in. They want you to buy in. But once you're no longer of use to them, that family, that tribe, that all the stuff that they preach is no longer there. And so for me, it was hard to watch Andrew make this decision and really not even have the opportunity to do it himself. It was released while in the middle of a game. He had to come into the locker room and answer all these questions. That moment was stolen from him, but he handled it with grace. And I think, again, my point is that the general population, I believe, if we can just slow down and realize that these players, these athletes, these entertainers are human beings at the end of the day, both good and bad, right? Positive and flawed, then I think it's a little bit easier to understand those decisions that they have to make that are not simply based on, am I going to play next year, but am I going to be able to play with my kids 20 years down the line? Am I going to be able to spend time with my family and spend that quality of time that I dreamed of? And so that's, I thank you for your question, because that's obviously it's pertinent to me, not only as a person who's gone through it, but also as somebody who's helping other people go through it.
Yeah, got it. All right, any more questions? Anything else that you want to impart? We've got a few minutes left here to the crowd, and you've been giving a lot of insights and great lessons, but anything else just that the crowd should know about you and just beyond number 89 that it's interesting to hear you talk about all this stuff, because I think what we see is this awesome football player, this is so awesome in the NFL, and I don't know, it's just interesting to hear kind of more, again, Doug Baldwin, not Doug Baldwin, the Seattle Seahawks.
I covered most of it, but I will say just a lasting impression. Just for me personally, and what I would ask of you as members of society, which I ask for myself and my family and my friends, is that I wish that we would be more empathic to one another. Not only as business leaders or intellectual minds or entertainers, but just as human beings on this planet. If we could just be more empathic to each other. And empathic meaning that, it's not so much what's important about your bottom line, but how is your bottom line impacting the people who work for your company, who are your colleagues, or who buy your product. Be empathic to human beings. I think our whole problem right now, the reason why we're so splintered in society and not only just in this country but also across the world, is because we're not evolving in the sense of empathy. Technology has been so pervasive in making life easier for us, and we've bought into it, and in some ways I think technology is evolving faster than human beings are. And the thing that's lacking the most, which I also think is going to add more value to it long term because of the scarcity, is empathy. We have to find a way to get back to understanding that we are human beings on this planet trying to survive. And if we do not take that seriously, this planet, I'm not talking about climate change, I'm talking about climate change, human beings, animals, all of us, as we live on this rock. If we don't start getting back to understanding that we're all human beings living on this rock, then we're going to die. And I hate to be morbid about that, but I truly believe that. And so my call to action, my desire for all of you as leaders, not only in business, but also as your families and your social groups, practice empathy. Practice thinking about other human beings. Practice thinking about other human beings. Practice thinking about other human beings. Look outside of yourself and realize that there's other human beings trying to survive on this planet. So why the fuck can we not get together and survive on this planet? Not for you and not for me, but for our children and for our great-grandchildren. I can't say that enough. And so I hope that, you don't take away just the cuss words of my conversation, but to actually understand that that is something that's driving me, and I hope that it drives more people so that we can solve real human problems.
Doug Baldwin, everybody. Hey, thanks, man.